The scene is eternalized in sepia and shadow. Blackwood Park, autumn of 1899. The image captures the height of Victorian restraint and the depth of its hidden rot. Standing beneath the weeping cascade of a great willow tree are Mr. Alistair Finch and Miss Elara Vance, the city's most anticipated couple. They were posed for their engagement portrait, yet their eyes tell a different, troubling story. Alistair, impeccable in his dark, tailored suit and bowler hat, holds the solitary, almost black rose. His face, angled towards Elara, is handsome but devoid of warmth, a predatory concentration fixed on his prize. He grips the stem with unnerving firmness. Elara's posture is elegant, her lace collar high, but her expression is the key. Her beautiful features betray not the joy of a bride-to-be, but a profound, quiet apprehension. Her gaze meets his, not in mutual affection, but as if searching for an escape or silently pleading. The atmosphere, amplified by the heavy foliage and the distant, blurred figures, is less romantic and more claustrophobic. This photograph, a physical record of their final minutes in public, is not a testament to love, but to ownership. It freezes the precise moment Alistair presented the Black Vow, the single flower that would soon become synonymous with a disappearance so complete, it would haunt London society for decades. The portrait is perfect, the moment, fatal. The dawn broke over the Finch estate, not with celebration, but with a paralyzing silence. Inside, the grand drawing-room lay in a state of grotesque preparation. Dozens of crystal glasses stood waiting on silver trays, ready for the champagne that would never be poured. A 5-tier cake, intricately iced, now seemed a mocking monument in the center of the hall. The air, heavy with the scent of lilies and unease, felt unnaturally still. Alistair's elderly housekeeper, Mrs. Albright, was the first to realize the terrifying finality of their absence. She found Alistair's study locked, but his room untouched. Elara, who had been staying in a separate wing, had left her favorite shawl draped neatly over a chair, as though she meant to return in mere minutes. There was no hastily packed luggage, no note of farewell, no sign of a forced entry, nothing to suggest a flight of passion or a sudden violent struggle. The emptiness of the rooms contradicted the lavish preparations, creating an atmosphere of immediate, crushing dread. It wasn't just an inconvenience, it felt deliberate. The vanished couple had not merely cancelled a party, they had erased themselves from the premises, leaving the scent of their impending celebration to decay into a public spectacle of failure and mystery. The unanswered questions began right here, in the cold, expectant silence of the drawing-room. Alistair Finch was not a man driven by passion, but by ledgers. Rising sharply in the mercurial world of London finance, he possessed a mind that saw people as assets and affection as a negligible expense. To his peers, he was the picture of meticulous self-control. To those who owed him, he was a cold, efficient machine. Rumors of his ruthlessness were as common as the smog over the Thames. It was said he'd ruined 3 men and appropriated their businesses without ever raising his voice. His pursuit of Elara Vance was viewed by many not as a courtship, but as a hostile takeover. The Vance family name held considerable weight, a currency Alistair lacked, while the family textile empire was dangerously close to collapse. Elara was, quite simply, the key to legitimacy and a necessary merger for his social ascent. The match was calculated, deliberate, and entirely public. This context made the idea of a romantic elopement utterly laughable to anyone who truly understood Alistair's temperament. He didn't abandon plans, he executed them with chilling precision. Investigators, relying on the testimony of his junior colleagues and rivals, quickly formed a consensus. Alistair Finch was the architect of whatever fate had befallen Elara. He was a man who planned his garden roses and his business deals with the same unwavering, sinister foresight. The question was not if he was involved, but why he had chosen to dismantle his perfectly constructed future and how he managed to do so without leaving a single compromising financial trace. His perfect absence was, in itself, the most damning evidence. Elara Vance maintained a flawless exterior, the ideal Victorian fiancée, demure, agreeable, and exquisitely dressed. Yet, those closest to her knew the façade masked a deep, gnawing anxiety regarding her impending marriage to Alistair. Her dearest friend, Miss Beatrice Caldwell, later testified to police about a chilling conversation just days before the engagement. She was terrified, Caldwell recalled, her voice trembling. Not of marriage itself, but of him. She said his eyes were always counting. Elara had reportedly confided her suspicions that Alistair was privy to the Vance family's financial distress, perhaps even orchestrating it to force the union. More disturbingly, she hinted at a private family secret, not financial, but historical, that Alistair had uncovered and was using as a leverage of ultimate control. She feared him less as a husband and more as a jailer. She never explicitly stated the secret, only that if it became public, it would ruin her entire bloodline. Her last letter to Caldwell, discovered tucked beneath a mattress, was brief and despairing. I feel bound by an unspoken contract. This wedding is a tomb, not a beginning. The handwriting, usually elegant, was rushed and spiky. This provided powerful counter-evidence to the police's hasty elopement theory. Elara Vance was not fleeing with her fiancé. She was walking, perhaps unwillingly, toward a predetermined doom, a doom she felt utterly incapable of preventing. Her fear was silent, but clearly documented. The police investigation, brief and ultimately ineffective, hinged entirely on the testimony of Arthur Hobbs, a hackney cab driver whose worn vehicle was the last verified transportation used by the couple. Hobbs was initially adamant. He had collected Mr. Finch and Miss Vance from Alistair's city office and driven them directly to the ornate wrought iron gates of Blackwood Park. This confirmed the park as the final point of contact, intensifying the sinister focus on the weeping willow. However, Hobbs's account grew frustratingly opaque under closer questioning. He vividly recalled Alistair's stern instruction. Wait here, I will settle the fare upon my return, but his memory of the couple actually entering the park was hazy. He swore he saw them walk through the gate and take the path toward the darker, overgrown section. Yet, when pressed on the exact time of his eventual departure, he could only offer a vague, hour-long window. More disturbing was his description of the atmosphere inside the cab. He noted the utter silence. They spoke not a word to each other, a stark contrast to the usual lively chatter of an engaged couple. He also observed Alistair carrying a long, dark canvas roll, not luggage, but something rigid and oddly shaped, which Alistair insisted on holding on his lap rather than placing on the seat. This detail, dismissed by the lead inspector as a drawing tube, hinted at premeditation, suggesting the calculating groom was not merely planning a spontaneous crime, but bringing his tools to the execution ground. Hobbs was the final witness, and his confused, yet detailed, memories only served to deepen the fog of mystery. The single, dark rose held in Alistair's hand in the final photograph was no ordinary bloom. It was a horticultural achievement, a hybrid he had spent years perfecting in his private greenhouses, giving it the imposing name, the Black Vow. The flower possessed an unnaturally deep, velvety crimson color, so dark it absorbed the light, appearing almost jet black in the photograph's sepia tones. Alistair treated his roses not as a hobby, but as a scientific endeavor, obsessively charting cross-pollinations and experimenting with novel fertilizers. This obsession became a crucial point of scrutiny. The rose itself was a symbol of his calculated nature, but rumors quickly surfaced among his disgruntled former gardeners about his strange soil mixtures. Alistair was reportedly fascinated by historical texts detailing ancient agricultural methods, particularly those used in royal gardens of the 17th century. These methods, designed to produce unique colors and prolonged life, often involved highly esoteric, and often toxic, compounds. One persistent, whispered claim centered on a historical restorative he acquired for the Black Vow. This substance, detailed in a rare pharmacological manuscript, was originally used in extremely small, controlled doses to preserve delicate specimens. However, the same text carried a chilling warning. In concentrated form, the compound included a potent neuromuscular agent derived from rare, dried herbs. The compound, when aerosolized or absorbed through prolonged exposure, was rumored to induce a state of total, silent paralysis, making the victim appear merely unconscious or gravely ill. The perfect, deadly silent weapon was not a knife or a gun, but the very flower he presented to his bride. The Black Vow was a chillingly apt name for a flower that sealed a final, terrifying silence. The Vance family, though aristocratic, was financially threadbare. Their textile mills, once the backbone of their wealth, were failing rapidly, leaving behind vast, mortgaged estates and a mountain of debt. Alistair Finch had initially pursued Elara purely for the secret inheritance, the long-rumored, undocumented fortune supposedly stashed away by a reclusive great-aunt decades earlier. He believed Elara was the sole key to locating and unlocking this hidden liquidity, the only thing that could truly solidify his position in London's highest echelon. However, a far darker truth emerged during Alistair's meticulous prenuptial research. He hadn't just found financial secrets, he had unearthed a deeply buried historical disgrace concerning Elara's paternal lineage. It was whispered in dusty archives that an ancestor, a prominent judge in the early 1800s, had been involved in a devastating judicial cover-up, a verdict that led to the wrongful execution of several innocent people to protect a powerful political ally. The records of this dark chapter were suppressed, but Alistair managed to find copies. This provided Alistair with ultimate leverage. He no longer needed the money, he needed the silence. By threatening to expose this horrifying ancestral crime, Alistair ensured Elara's compliance, forcing her into the marriage and guaranteeing her cooperation in locating the inheritance. Elara's fear, referenced in Chapter 4, was not just of Alistair's control over her life, but his control over her family's legacy. The marriage was a forced transaction where the currency was not gold, but the preservation of a deeply stained family name. The park's oldest groundsman, a taciturn man named Silas Thorne, was initially dismissed by investigators as a mere eccentric. Yet, his brief, startling observation quickly became the most tantalizing loose end. He claimed he was tending to the flower beds near the central willow when the final photograph was taken. Moments after the flash, he saw the couple move deeper into the shadowy recess beneath the willow's heavy branches. Crucially, he then saw two additional, dark figures emerge from the direction of the ornamental gazebo, visible in the background of the photo. Thorne insisted these figures were dressed in working-class clothing, not the attire of park visitors, and that they moved with a purpose, converging on Alistair and Elara. His initial description suggested a swift, coordinated action, not a chance encounter. This testimony supported the theory that Alistair had arranged not an elopement, but an ambush, enlisting accomplices to help subdue and dispose of Elara. However, 3 days later, Thorne dramatically recanted his entire statement. He claimed the light had been poor, his eyesight failing, and that the figures were likely just the distortion of the willow's pendulous leaves in the fading light. His retraction was sudden, complete, and delivered with a palpable fear that seemed far greater than simple embarrassment. Investigators suspected he had been silenced, either through a substantial bribe or, more likely, a terrifying threat. His swift change of heart confirmed one chilling truth: the area surrounding the willow tree was the nexus of the crime, and someone powerful was ensuring that its secrets remained buried in the shadows. During a subsequent, more thorough search of the Finch residence, Inspector Davies, a junior officer with a keener eye, noted an anomaly in the otherwise meticulous order of the cellar. Tucked away in a seldom-used pantry was a square of dust on the stone floor, far cleaner than the surrounding grime. It was the distinct imprint of a large, heavy object, specifically, a sea chest or steamer trunk. The mark suggested it had been sitting there for months, only recently and hastily removed. Further inquiries revealed the trunk belonged to Alistair. His former valet confirmed that the master had spent weeks sorting and storing various items into the trunk, insisting that no one assist him. Crucially, the valet recalled Alistair transporting the trunk himself, utilizing a private, unmarked carriage the day before the engagement photograph was taken. The trunk was gone before the couple even set foot in Blackwood Park. This discovery shattered any remaining pretense of spontaneity. The crime was clearly premeditated. The missing trunk likely contained the necessary items for the final act, the implements for a quick, secret burial, perhaps the dark canvas roll seen by the cabman, a change of clothes, and potentially the physical evidence of Alistair's leverage over Elara, the documents detailing the Vance family's hidden secret. Alistair hadn't vanished after the crime. He had carefully prepared his escape route and his means of disposal beforehand. The trunk was not just missing luggage. It was the physical manifestation of his plan, transported and hidden long before the Black Vow was even offered. Its contents, now lost to the police, held the complete blueprint of the tragedy. The investigation into the Black Vow rose led Inspector Davies to Dr. Elias Thorne, a retired apothecary and chemist in a quiet corner of Bloomsbury. Thorne, an expert in obscure botanical compounds, recalled Alistair Finch visiting him 6 months prior. Alistair, feigning academic curiosity, had requested an analysis of a rare, dried powder, the primary component for his specialized historical restorative. Thorne, a man of conscience, instantly recognized the compound's danger. He identified the core ingredient as a purified extract of Atropolethalus, a plant known historically for its paradoxical properties. A minute dose could act as a potent preservative, but a slightly higher concentration was a fast-acting neurotoxin utilized in ancient execution methods. Thorne had issued a grave warning to Alistair, stressing that any attempt to use the substance outside of strictly controlled chemical preservation was tantamount to attempted murder. He specifically detailed how inhalation of the compound's dust or extended contact with the plant treated with it could lead to rapid, silent respiratory paralysis. Alistair, Thorne recalled, had merely smiled, a cold, dismissive gesture, and assured the chemist his use was purely for horticultural research. Thorne's testimony provided the first scientific confirmation of the poison theory. It linked Alistair directly to a lethal agent and explained the crime's unnerving silence. Elara wouldn't have screamed, struggled, or even shown outward signs of distress. By presenting her with a rose, treated with the compound, Alistair ensured her doom was swift and, most crucially, unwitnessed. The chemical warning transformed the case from a missing persons mystery into a meticulously planned murder. Faced with a complete lack of physical evidence, no body, no forced entry, and no witnesses willing to stick to their initial testimony, the official police inquiry ground to a humiliating halt. Under intense public pressure to close the high-profile case, the chief inspector issued a final, controversial ruling. The disappearance of Alistair Finch and Elara Vance was to be classified as a voluntary elopement. The theory was that the couple, perhaps overwhelmed by the demands of their public roles, had secretly run off to marry quietly abroad, intending to return once the scandal died down. This conclusion was met with immediate scorn and disbelief across London society. The Vance family vehemently rejected it, pointing to Elara's deep emotional distress and her lack of passport or packed luggage. Alistair's business rivals laughed openly at the suggestion that the ruthlessly ambitious financier would abandon a multi-million-pound merger and his carefully cultivated career for a whim of romance. The theory was a convenient, lazy fiction designed to clear the police docket rather than solve a crime. This official failure cemented the case's place in local folklore. The public recognized that the truth was far darker than a simple runaway bride and groom. By dismissing the possibility of foul play, the police inadvertently shielded Alistair from further scrutiny, granting him the crucial time needed to ensure his plans, whatever they truly entailed, were fully executed. The elopement lie became a bitter symbol of the Victorian establishment's incompetence, allowing a terrifying, calculated crime to officially fade into a romanticized, yet untrue, mystery. The true horror was now hidden beneath a veneer of official indifference. While the police succumbed to the ease of the elopement lie, Mrs. Vance, Elara's mother, refused to surrender to official incompetence. Driven by a desperate, maternal certainty that her daughter had met with foul play, she began her own agonizing, solitary search. Ignoring the social embarrassment and the park's eerie reputation, she returned repeatedly to Blackwood Park, always drawn back to the spot beneath the vast weeping willow, the heart of the tragedy preserved in the photograph. Weeks after the case was closed, on a cold, misty morning, Mrs. Vance's persistence yielded a chilling reward. She was meticulously examining the ground, scraping away the leaf litter and moss where the willow's deepest branches touched the earth, when her fingers brushed against something tiny and metallic. It was a small, silver clasp, intricately engraved, and slightly bent as if pulled loose in haste. It was not mere detritus, it was a fastening from the high, lace collar Elara was wearing in the final portrait. This small, overlooked object was the most crucial piece of physical evidence ever found. Its location, snagged beneath a root directly under the suspected burial site, indicated a struggle or a violent, quick removal of clothing or jewelry at that precise location. The police had dismissed the area as too damp for a proper search, but Mrs. Vance's raw grief had guided her where professional skepticism had failed. She held the small clasp, a cold, silent confirmation of her deepest fears. It wasn't evidence of an elopement, it was proof of a final, terrible resistance. The secret was buried, but the earth had yielded one tiny, devastating clue. The willow tree in Blackwood Park was ancient, its massive trunk hollowed out by age, and its branches, heavy with foliage, created a year-round bower of deep shadow. It stood not as a feature of beauty, but as a monument to seclusion. This specific spot, immortalized in the photograph, was perfectly chosen by Alistair for its natural concealment. The ground beneath the deepest, heaviest branches was perpetually soft and damp, matted with decades of decaying leaves and a thick root system that discouraged casual foot traffic. This dampness, the same condition that made police abandon a thorough search, was paradoxically the key to the crime's success. The softness of the earth made digging swift and silent. The dense network of roots would quickly intertwine with anything buried, ensuring the contents would be sealed in a natural casket, difficult to exhume without heavy equipment, which would certainly attract attention. The willow was not just a backdrop, it was Alistair's accomplice. The chilling truth is that the weeping bough offered immediate, absolute privacy. The distant gazebo and pathway, visible in the photo, only served to highlight the depth of the shadows beneath the canopy. The two dark figures witnessed by the groundsman could have worked quickly, shielded from view by the natural curtain of leaves. Elara Vance, already paralyzed by the slow-acting neurotoxin from the Black Vow, would have been unable to fight, her silent ordeal taking place just feet from where the photograph captured her serene, yet terrified, final expression. Her body, and perhaps the missing trunk's contents, found their eternal resting place here, beneath the constant, silent vigil of the willow. The pieces of the mystery, from the chemist's warning to the silver clasp, now allow for a chilling reconstruction of the fateful afternoon. Alistair Finch led Elara Vance to the precise, secluded spot beneath the willow. He gave her the Black Vow, a gesture of love masking the delivery of the poison. The deep, sweet scent of the rose, enhanced by the volatile preservative, carried the minute, but effective, dose of neurotoxin. Elara's internal clock of terror began the moment she inhaled. Within minutes, the agent would have induced an increasing, terrifying paralysis, first subtle, then absolute. She would have retained full consciousness, aware of her fate, yet unable to cry out, struggle, or even gesture. This explains the silence noted by the cabman and the serene but resigned look in the photograph. Her body was already beginning to betray her. As the paralysis took hold, the two hired accomplices, the dark shapes noted by the groundsman, emerged from the gazebo's shadow. They carried the digging implements, likely concealed within the canvas roll seen by the cabman. They quickly subdued the now motionless Elara, who offered only the slight, silent resistance that tore the silver clasp from her collar. The grave, hastily dug days earlier and now reopened, was ready beneath the damp, soft soil. Alistair would have ensured Elara was lowered while still alive but silenced, a final, monstrous act of control. The Black Vow was fulfilled not in marriage, but in a terrifying, premature entombment. The missing trunk, which contained the documents of the Vance secret, was then disposed of elsewhere by the accomplices, allowing Alistair to make his final, clean disappearance, ensuring no trace of either his victim or his motive remained at the scene. The official police narrative, the convenient elopement lie, ultimately prevailed, allowing the case of Alistair Finch and Elara Vance to settle into the cold, dusty files of unsolved mysteries. No bodies were ever recovered, no arrests were ever made, and the financial and aristocratic circles of London were forced to accept the uncomfortable truth that a perfectly constructed couple could simply vanish into the urban ether. Alistair Finch's financial empire was eventually liquidated in his absence, his meticulous accounts offering no clue to his final destination or the fate of the missing trunk. Today, Blackwood Park endures, a haven for strolling citizens unaware of the tragedy entombed beneath their feet. The great willow tree, now even larger and more gnarled, still weeps its heavy boughs over the same patch of dark earth. The area remains perpetually damp and shadowed, a natural, enduring crypt sealed by the powerful root system and the silent conspiracy of nature. Mrs. Vance's silver clasp is the only tangible piece of the puzzle, preserved by the family as a grim counterpoint to the official record. The story serves as a potent, chilling reminder of the dark underbelly of Victorian propriety. It demonstrates how easily wealth, ruthless planning, and official indifference can collaborate to erase a life and bury a monstrous secret. Alistair Finch achieved his final perverse goal. He exerted absolute control, silenced his opposition, and disappeared without ever facing justice. He took his secrets, the true nature of the Black Vow, the whereabouts of the inheritance, and the dark final moments of Elara Vance, to an unknown, lasting silence. The only memorial to Elara is the unquiet whisper carried on the wind through the leaves of the old willow, a constant, low lament for the fate sealed by a single, fateful rose in 1899.